Welcome to our last talk of the LTSIG day. May I remind you that the session is being recorded and will be then shared with the members. After this talk, we will be having an open forum where you can find out more about the work the LTSIG does. You can also participate in the quiz we have prepared to celebrate our 30th anniversary. And it is my honor to introduce to you Stephen Bax, Professor in Applied Linguistics. He has worked in language teaching and learning for a long time and has had a long, interesting call. He used to work at Canterbury University, but is now at CRELLA at the University of Bedfordshire. So, Professor Bax.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I failed to send in my bio in time, so I'm very grateful to you for covering me. But I'll introduce myself a little bit in a minute. So, yeah, thank you very much. As you can see from the screen, I work at CRELLA, University of Bedfordshire. But this talk is not really related to CRELLA research because it's mostly related to a website that I've been developing with a small software company called WebLingua. When I sent in my abstract for the talk, I did mention that it's a product. There's a product in my talk, a product brochure, but it was not put in the brochure. So if any of you hate products of any kind, this is your chance to leave. Well, it won't be a hard sell, believe me. It's more of a discussion of the issues around it. Just a little bit of background. As was mentioned, I work at CRELLA, which is in Luton, just north of London. I'm sorry to say the map is a little bit blurred. I think it was raining at the time they made it. That's my house on the right. No, it isn't. That's the research centre where CRELLA is housed. It's atypical for Luton, I think you'll agree if you know Luton. It's actually modelled on the Prime Minister's country house of Chequers. That's a straight copy, made in 1907. In the front you've got the student swimming pool. Good. It's a fish pond, actually, with no fish in it. I've been teaching since 1981. You can guess which one is me, maybe? I remember the old days when I was slimmer and had more hair, but in different places. And that was in Sudan when I started teaching. And since then, I've been working a lot in the Arab world overseas. I worked for a long time at Canterbury Christchurch University, and my research basically focuses on discourse assessment and ICT in education. All right, let's get going because time is a bit short. So today what I want to do is talk about different tools, only 3 tools in fact, for analysing Lexis, grammar and discourse. Some of the principles, some of the background. I want to show you the tools. So this talk depends a lot on the internet working. So if it doesn't work, we'll stop early and go straight to the wine later. But I have tested the internet about 17 times during the afternoon and it seems to be okay. We'll see how we go. So one of the ones I want to look at is LexTutor, and you probably know this one, which is a well-known site based in Canada. The next one is Cometrics, which, has anyone used Cometrics here? Anyone put your hand up if you've used Cometrics? 1. Okay, one person. 2. Okay. So I can say anything I like about it and you won't tell me I'm lying, is that right? Okay, I'll explain a bit what it's about. And the third one is the one I've been working on myself with the software company, which is called TextInspector.com. And I want to talk about some of the issues and principles of such tools and what they can do and also what they can't do. I've noticed some of you are taking pictures of it. Of course, I'll put the slides up on the CRELLA website or on my website. I'm sure you can find them later on if you look on Google. But I do want to have time for discussion and suggestions. Part of the reason for presenting Text Inspector to you is to get your ideas of what such a tool could do and should do for you. And then I hope that we can actually incorporate that in. It's a product in development, if you like. So I'm very interested for you to think, what do you use or what might you use such tools as this for, and what would you ideally like such a tool to do? So basically a little bit of background about Lexis in texts. It's very important to emphasize again and again that Lexis is just one area of text difficulty. And one of the dangers of a talk like this is it makes me sound as if I think Lexis is the only reason why texts are difficult. Well, of course it's not. It's only one area. You might think it's the most important area, but nonetheless, let's keep that in our mind. So when I'm talking about analysing texts in terms of their lexis, and I talk about this text being difficult, that's a shorthand for the lexical aspect of it. But of course, we'll come on to issues of grammar and discourse as well. So a simple question, simple. In terms of reading, how many words does a reader need to know in order to read comfortably? Well, let's make it a rhetorical question because of time. Here's one account, one idea from Khalifa and Schmidt, and I'll give you references at the end. Quite a long one, but if you look at the underlined parts, you've got around 2,000 to 3,000 word families should supply the bulk of lexical resources required for basic everyday conversation. That's the conversation side. 3,000 word families should allow learners to begin to read authentic text. Begin to read. We've got 3,000 words. Notice word families. We'll come to that in a minute as well. They go on a bit more to say, well, maybe 5,000 word families would allow you to read a wide variety of authentic text. If you know 5,000 words, no, 5,000 word families, we'll come to that in a minute, you should be able to read a wide variety of authentic texts. However, this was based on 95% coverage, the idea that a reader needs to understand 95% of the text. But as you can see there, it's now thought that 98% is more likely. So it's something in the area of 8,000 to 9,000 word families. Seems to be going up, doesn't it? But obviously as the texts get more difficult, you're going to need more lexical resources to deal with them. And finally, the final part of their quotation, it's important to note, very important to note, these sizes are approximations. The ability to accomplish the things in English, I think they mean these things in English, depends on many other factors. So it's really a little bit of a stab in the dark, I think. But nonetheless, it gives us a rule of thumb, as they say at the end of the quotation there, in terms of what we need. But I think it's essential to say, obviously, Lexis is very important. It's not the only thing, but very important for understanding text. But also, of course, we need grammatical knowledge, discourse competence, and a whole host of other things which we'll get to in a minute. Now, onto the issue of word families. Now, maybe you've seen this a lot in the literature. Word families tend to be used to indicate things such as the word work. Take the word work as the basic word. Now, the word family would, in theory, include work, worked, working, workman, workmanlike. Now, that seems fine, but it seems slightly problematic to me if we're going to use a word family as a way of estimating text difficulty. Because you'll see that the word work is far less frequent than the word workmanlike, and therefore likely to be far less difficult. The difficulty is not the same. So when we're talking about the word family, this seems to be an immediate problem, actually. And some of the tools which assess text on the basis of word families, I think, run into a problem here, which is not often admitted. So is it okay for estimating text knowledge or in text analysis? I think there's an issue there which we need to consider, and we'll come back to that a bit later. This is a diagram taken from my book on discourse and genre, just to indicate the point again about Lexis. These are the areas of knowledge, if you like, that we need, some of the areas of knowledge we need to understand a text. You've got a lot of them, starting with world knowledge at the top, social knowledge, cultural knowledge, text and genre in the middle. At the bottom you've got words, Lexis, you've got grammar as well. But this just gives you an indication of how many things, how many resources we need when understanding a text. And the reason I put this up here was to emphasize that lexical knowledge is not the only thing. But then I went to Michael Hoey's talk this morning. Did any of you go to the first? And I thought, well, I'll throw that in the bin. Lexis, that's it. Don't need anything else. I'm sure he wouldn't quite say that, but there was a strong emphasis in his talk on the importance of Lexis, which I think is an interesting one. But nonetheless, I think we would agree there are other elements in text difficulty besides the words, the vocabulary. Just to take one example, meta-discourse. If we look back at the diagram here, you take the area of discourse being the shaded box and above, or the shaded box effectively. Well, meta-discourse features, that's one area that we could use when assessing the discourse elements of a text. So you've got a heavy quotation at the top there, which basically says, what is meta-discourse? The language we use to express our awareness of discourse in process, the management of discourse. Look at the examples at the bottom. So the word therefore is seen as a meta-discourse marker indicating a logical connection between parts of the discourse. Similarly, the word essential, if used in a particular context, of course, if an author says, in my view it is essential to, the author is likely to be emphasizing an element of the discourse. So these are seen as markers to do with discourse management of a text. and also to do with the attitude of the writer towards the reader as well. There's something, an interpersonal side as well going on. So you've got topic shift, and finally is a frame marker. So why do we mention these? Because these are, if you like, lexical items which can indicate something about the discourse structure and organisation of a text. So they might be one way in to analysing the discourse aspect of a text through using the computer. In a recent piece of research funded by Cambridge ESOL, I have to say thanks to them by law, so I'm saying it, meta-discourse use was examined across 3 levels, FCE, CA and CPE. And just very briefly, because it was a massive great piece of research and an article, we showed that the amount of meta-discourse use significantly decreased as learners went up the level. Now you might think, oh, that's interesting, why should that be? Well, higher level learners seem to use less or fewer meta-discourse markers because presumably they were indicating discourse elements in another way, not necessarily through lexical resources alone. But that's a big bit of research which I can come back to later on and perhaps discuss. This is an example of some of the meta-discourse research that we did. We looked at logical connectives and found that as a group, as a whole, there seemed to be no significant difference as learners got higher up. However, within the group as a whole, there were some significant differences. The first row, there were no differences in these markers. The second one, which says up, there was a significant increase in the use of these markers as students went up the levels. In other words, CPE students used significantly more of these ones than FCE students did. And down and so on. This just gives you a kind of indication of how issues of Lexis can be used to get some insight into meta-discourse, into elements of discourse management. Okay, let me turn to examine Lex Tutor as the first of the 3 that I want to talk about. Now, because of the dangers of the internet and it all collapsing, the possibility, I've opened up lots of tabs in the top which have the data already analysed there. So we'll analyse a text on Harrogate in a minute. Did you know that Harrogate in 2013 was declared to be the 3rd most romantic destination in the world, beating Paris, Rome and Vienna? So bad luck, Paris, Rome and Vienna. Harrogate has got it all. That's if you believe Wikipedia. Anyway, we'll come to that text in a minute. So this is Lex Tutor. This is the opening page of it, and I think it's a really wonderful and useful site. And you can see just from the front page, it has masses of different tools on it, doing all kinds of things. I haven't had time even to look at all of them. I won't click on any buttons in case the internet fails us, but this then is Vocab Profile. That's this one here, Vocab Profile. And that's one that I think many people commonly use. How many of you have used that one? Anybody? A few. Okay, great. And I think this is a really good and interesting site. He keeps using it, he keeps extending it and expanding it. So it's now got VP Complete. Not sure about the spelling there, Shakespearean spelling. But let me show you exactly the kind of thing that it does. If you put into, this is the classic version, if you put our text from Harrogate into there, and you click Submit. Have I clicked Submit? No, I haven't. Oh dear. Let's see if the internet works. Yeah, it does. Okay. Then you get an analysis of your text in terms of the Lexis. You'll see the top left, K1 words. These are the first 1,000 words in terms of frequency. Okay. And our text, 76% of our text of Harrogate is within the first 1,000 words in terms of frequency. Okay? Fair enough? Except that this is word families. Okay? And that slightly changes things. Now, I'm not criticising the site in this because there are other tools on the site which use the BNC and other tools, but just this particular one is using word families from Nations Word Lists actually. But you'll see the nice little diagram in the middle of the screen there which has the percentages. So you've got 76% are the first 1,000 words, 4.93% the second 1,000, 0.7% are academic words, and off-list is 18.31%. It's quite a lot off-list, probably proper nouns, quite a few of them. Well, let's see actually. You can see a really nice feature is that the text is then coloured in terms of the words, and you'll see that Harrogate, the first word, is off-list, so it's in red. The blue words are the K1 words, okay? But just let's have a look at some of these. You've got here riding, the word riding. Now that's actually a proper noun, isn't it? but here it's classed as a K1 word. Well, why? Because the word riding exists at K1 level. So you can see immediately there's a slight inaccuracy there, but we'll come to that in a minute. And you'll see a few others. Paris, Rome, and Vienna are off list. Consistently is the only academic word according to this analysis here. Okay, now if you look at the last, I added, besides the Harrogate text, I added in another, if I can see it, here we are. I added in two more things. One was the pronouns, we'll ignore that for a minute, and the other one was this sentence here. He tried to record the information just for the record, and what I was looking at there was homographs. So he tried to record just for the record, okay? Now in this particular thing, it doesn't actually distinguish. Record and record, they come out the same, okay? Well, remember that, we'll come back to that in a few minutes' time. So, to summarise, I would say that I think LexTutor is really a useful tool. It doesn't deal that well, as many tools don't, including mine, I'll explain it in a minute, with homographs. And also one reason is it doesn't do parsing. So if you look here, how could you actually distinguish in a text between record and to record? Well, you could parse the text first to see which one was a verb and then check against the frequencies, and that's one of the things I'm trying to do. But in general terms, I really like it. Many great features, very transparent. That's one thing I do like about it. You can see where things are going wrong because it puts it there in colours. Comprehensive. There is the issue of word families in some of the lists, and the issue of homographs as well is possibly a question. But still, I think it's a great site and very useful. Now, let's look at cometrics. I think only one of you has used cometrics, is that right? Perhaps two of you. Now, cometrics is to be found here, cometrics.memphis.edu. You have to sign in and register, but it's pretty painless. When you do so, you can get to a screen something like this. You put in the top left-hand corner a title, a genre, a source, and a job code. And then you put your text in. Now, my rather foolish text here is simply a list of pronouns. And the reason is that cometrics, I think, has many good features. It has something like 106 different indices in it, so it's a massive number. Okay? But the big problem for me with cometrics is transparency. It's very difficult to see what's going on. All you get is a chunk of numbers at the end. So if you look here on the right-hand side, the yellowed ones, I put pronouns there, and the number right next to it is supposed to be the indication of the pronouns in my text. So for example, it says pronoun to the left, it says the number 600. Well, I'm guessing, or I think from reading it, that means 6. Well, how many words have I got? I've got 10 words there. Pronoun incident 6. How can that be if all of them are... Well, possessive pronouns don't seem to be included. But it doesn't say that. You've got to work that out. Okay? Then you go down first person singular pronoun incidents. Well, it puts it down as 3. I, me, my. I assume it's 3. 300. And my point here is that when you actually dig into cometrics, it's very difficult and tiresome, if you like, to find out what exactly is going on. In other words, there's a problem with transparency, which I think is difficult. You can put in a whole text. This is the Harrogate text. And you do get a lot of interesting indications of what's going on, but in some cases too many. And I think they're not particularly well expressed or explained. And in particular, I want to point out one area which I think is a weakness, which I think we need to consider. So in general terms, time is racing away, many great features. There are a huge range of indices, but there seems to be a lack of transparency, which hides for me some odd analysis and some weaknesses in some of the word lists. And I was planning now to talk through the word lists of concreteness, but I think for reasons of time I'll skip that. So, shut your eyes. It's very interesting, but no time. So, let's move on to textinspector.com. This is what I've been trying to work out with WebLingua, the company, to try and develop something which I think does some things, not everything, but some things I think rather better. So this is Text Inspector, textinspector.com. This site is what they call a freemium site, which means it's basically free up to a certain level, but beyond that there's a subscription element for certain features, and I'll explain why in a minute. So first of all, you put your text in here, you click submit at the bottom. You can split the document into several documents if you want to. You can exclude digits if you want to, because occasionally they're rather painful. And on the right-hand side, you can upload files in some PDF formats and some text formats as well. Once you've done that, you get something like this. And you've got your text here. This is the Harrogate text. And it gives you a number of statistics. You can see in the left-hand bar here, you've got several elements that you can analyse. The first one, statistics, counts your sentences, your tokens and so on. It also counts your syllables. This is particularly useful if you're analysing spoken discourse and you want to do things like syllable per unit, whatever that may be. And we think that's the most accurate syllable count available, because it compares it with a particular dictionary of syllables, which is hand counted actually. Very painful job, we didn't do it. You've got various other elements, words with more than 2 syllables, because that's one of the elements for Flesh Kincaid and Gunning Fox. Readability scores here. And then at the bottom it puts your sentences there for you, so you can just check that it has actually counted them properly. If it hasn't, you can go up and amend it. Say, well, in fact there are 9 sentences there. You can change it to 9, because that affects Gunning Fog and so on. So you can amend it for later analysis. Now, lexical diversity is basically just 2 elements here, and this is the VocD and the MTLD counts of lexical diversity, which are generally considered to be the most authoritative and valuable. Notice that they estimate each text. They pass it through and they take an estimate, randomly taking elements of the text. So if I ran this one again with the same text, it will come up with a subtly different number. What you're supposed to do is run it several times and get an average for lexical diversity for VocD and for MTLD. Okay, tagger. This then tags it, and that was in real time, so it's pretty quick today at least. And it gives you the tags, the grammatical tags. This uses the tree tagger parser, which is okay. It's not the best in the world, you can get better ones, but it's about 91-92% accuracy. And it gives you a detailed analysis which you can toggle. If you want to see exactly all of the items that it's tagged, you can do that, or you can get particular ones. And I think a useful feature of it is you can actually amend the analysis. If you think that Harrogate is not a proper noun, you can change it to whatever you like, an adjective, and then you can update it and it will change the count up here for you. And this is an important step to do this first, because then of course you go on to analysing the Lexis according to the grammatical characteristics. So you parse it first, then you check the Lexis. Now I'll leave EVP for the minute. Let me show you the BNC, British National Corpus, and this is the big version of it. So this has now taken the parsed version of the text, and now it puts it here in terms of the unknown words. These are the unknown words, mainly proper nouns, and then it will give you all of the others, including the rarest ones, which are here, this one, 10 to 20k, Spa, Dales, and Happiest. And Dales actually, it lists it correctly as a proper noun, which is surprising, but it must be in the BNC in that format. And of course you can export the analysis. You can export all the details of this and all the details of all of the analysis on the left-hand side to Excel format. This is COCA, the Corpus of Contemporary American English. Same, very similar, and probably comes up with a similar analysis. Actually, it identifies one word as much rarer. Oh, that's the word Dales. Interestingly, maybe there are more Dales in Britain than in America, I don't know. Once again, you can print that off and so on as you like. Now let me show you this one. This is the EVP. This is the English Vocabulary Profile from Cambridge University Press, and it belongs to Cambridge University Press. So this is very much a prototype, and we're in discussion with Cambridge University Press to allow it to be used on their site for free, and on my site as well, this site as well, for free to a certain level of use. You won't be able to use it completely without paying a subscription, because Cambridge University Press obviously put a lot of money into it and they want a little bit of money back. But this basically, I've only put in A1 to B2 at the moment, so C1 and C2 are not there. But this compares your text with the EVP, gives you the percentages, gives you the bar chart, so you'll see unlisted words are a lot, partly because it hasn't been properly finished or completed yet. So you'll see, for example, the word is isn't found. That's because the EVP only gives you, at this stage, the verb to be. And what we now have to do is go through it, making sure it will find every instance of the word to be, is, am, and so on, past tenses and so on. So there's still work to be done on this, but eventually it will give you a fully accurate reading of your text against the English vocabulary profile text. And again, here, you can change it. If you think that this particular example of the is not a simple determiner, you can say, well, no, I think it's a determiner comparing something. These are Cambridge's terms. You can click on it, you can update it, and the count up above will go up. So you can actually make sure you get exactly the right count for your analysis. So this particular bit will definitely be on a subscription element because it doesn't belong to me, but it won't be a large subscription, and there will be a free version, we hope, on the Cambridge site and also on this site as well, for people to get a quick indication of their text measured against the EVP. Time is almost running out. I think I've got probably a minute or two. Just one more. This, it can, as I say, give multiple text, and I just want to show you that's very easy. If you simply split your text in with any splitter that you want, in this case I've just chosen a slash. So this looks like one text, but I'm asking it to split it into two, and it will split it into two, and now you've got document 1 is there, document 2 is there, each of them one word of course, but then it will perform all of these analyses on both documents at the same time, and you can obviously download that as well. So just to conclude then, before I get kicked out, what we're trying to do with Text Inspector, we haven't got there yet, as you can see. We're trying to be extremely transparent, so at every stage you can see exactly what is analysed, and you can correct it if necessary, and at least you know the limitations, which I think is really important for software of this kind. It uses big, up-to-date data sets, allows multiple text, includes parsing, not to 100% accurate, but if it's not accurate you can correct it, allows ongoing adjustments, will include meta-discourse at the next stage. Meta-discourse markers will be one of the tags down the side, so we can actually start to analyse meta-discourse to some extent. It allows you to download, but it has some disadvantages. It's in a freemium model, in other words it's not all free, and it's also in development. So although it's available now, and for the time being it is free as far as it's there, but for the time being it is free, but it will eventually develop into a freemium model. I think what I'm keen to hear is any suggestions that you might have, or jokes or insults, and then that can help me either to improve or to feel good or bad depending on the situation. Let me put up, while we're talking or while you want to add things up, I've got a lot of very small references there, but if you want to, again I'll put this on my own website, stephenbax.net, and I'll put it there for you. And there will also actually be a Text Inspector blog alongside textinspector.com, not a blog but an explanatory site, so you'll be able to see this there as well eventually. So thank you very much. Any questions? Yeah.
So just a quick one. When you showed us Lex Tutor, it had that academic word count.
Yeah.
Will you be doing that on Text Inspector? Or?
That's Coxhead's academic word list, yes. I did on the original version, I did, and we had the general service list, the GSL, and the academic list laid on top of it. But one thing that worries me about this, the general service list as used now is often done in word families, and it doesn't seem to me very accurate. I think a far more accurate thing is to do it by a BNC list, where it's actually each item has its own number. But the academic word list is easy to do. Do you think it serves the purpose just on its own?
To be honest, I don't have to do a lot of marking where I would use something like this, but I have a lot of students doing IELTS at an academic level.
Yeah.
And because they're postgrads, and they're sometimes not aware of how few academic words they're using. They tend to rely too much on slang and spoken English, and they don't always see the difference. So that academic, point. Just to kind of just show them visually. I think
yes. I think on the left-hand side we will put an academic word list for chat, but also the COCO list here has got a really good and extensive list of academic Lexis too, and that will also be in there. In fact, the COCO list has got, for example, media language, as well. So in theory, we could just do a whole thing just with COCA words for all kinds of different domains. I don't know how accurate or reliable the academic list from COCA is, but we'll certainly put the Coxhead one on as soon as we can. Yeah. Sorry, I think you were first.
Yes, could you outline what you see the major applications of including the vocabulary profile in this would be?
Sorry, you mean Lex Tutor?
No, in your program.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what you see the major applications for including the profile?
What do you mean by the profile?
The vocabulary profile, the profile project, the
English profile.
vocabulary.
Oh, sorry, the English vocabulary profile.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, yeah. Well, it is, I mean, it is the only one, sorry, there's only one word in that example. It is the only list that I know which actually benchmarks word vocabulary according to the Common European Framework. Now, it does that from a very specific source. It basically takes vocabulary from learner writing and analysed when do learners first significantly use these words.
Yes, I understand the profile.
No, but I have to, the limitations are important because that kind of answers your question. It does have its limitations, and I think it's really important to be aware of that. But nonetheless, the benefit, which I think what you're asking about, is because it does give you a snapshot of your text in terms directly of the Common European Framework, rather than in terms, for example, of statistical count on the British National Corpus.
So what
that's the reason.
Practical applications for teachers or test makers?
Well, I see this, and the others as well actually, as being very useful for, you put a text in, either a text you want to give as a reading text, or a text that a student has written, you put it in, you get a very quick profile of the vocabulary within that text. And what you can do basically along the left-hand side is get a profile from different points of view. From the EVP, British National Corpus, COCA, meta-discourse and so on. Or even if you just want a grammatical identification of the kind of grammar that they're using, the tagger will go some way towards that. Thank you for your question. I should have said that long ago, shouldn't I? Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
I mean, as an enthusiastic but very lay user of these sorts of things, I'd have a sort of marketing tip perhaps, which is please invest as much as energy as you possibly can in making this friendly. Lots of...
is it not friendly now?
Well, I mean, lots of abbreviations to begin with, which are not transparent.
You're right, 100% you're right.
And I would say, do not make a lot of allowances, so to speak.
Yes, I mean, I'm kind of torn between myself being an old, fusty academic type, and the company who are pushing it, who are dynamic, go ahead. But in the end, I would have to be the one to put all the work into doing that. But I certainly will. What we're planning is to do a help thing, which is a very accessible blog-style thing, where each of these things is explained. What do we mean by tagger? What do we mean by EVP? Where everything's explained step by step, and little videos explaining how to use each one. So that will come, but I think we need probably a few months to do that. It's still in that kind of stage where it needs a bit of... but thank you for the suggestion, we certainly will. Yeah. Yes?
With this feature, I think it would be useful to actually be able to see the text and the words coloured.
You're right. Absolutely right. You can do that. I'm sorry, I've only got one word here in this example. You can do that here. You've got the word this coloured, okay, and you can change it. So on the EVP bit, we do that. It's not. I don't think it's very attractive at the moment or very clear. I think the vocabulary Lex profile is much nicer in that respect. I went to a talk in TESOL in Portland, Oregon last week, and went to a talk on this, and the coloured bit was the most popular bit. Not on this, sorry, on Lex Tutor, and people love the coloured bit, because it's so visual and graphic. So we certainly will do that, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on whether or not examiners should need to use software like this eventually?
Yes, I mean, I think it has a place in analysing text, as long as you accept the limitations. It's analysing the Lexis, to some extent the grammar, to some extent the discourse of the text. But it's not examining everything. So, for example, some of the big exam boards are investing a lot now in far more significant software to evaluate and assess student writing, which includes some of this thinking in it, but it has a slightly different role from that. But I do think that as long as it's used carefully, examiners will find this a useful tool. I'm expecting someone to put up a sign in a minute, but yeah.
You said you'd go back to talking about word families in relation to your particular tool. I mean, do I understand that there's different levels of affectation that can make something included or not included as a word family?
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. Yeah, basically, we haven't yet followed the word families thing in this at all.
Okay.
So each word, for example, work, working, workman-like, each one has an individual entry on, because BNC and COCA are stratified according to the exact incidence of the word. So the word working has a different number from the word work. So this stratifies it in what I think far more accurately than a word family approach. You see what I mean? Also on top of that, it parses it, so you know the part of speech, and it also matches record and record with the correct one.
But work, works, worked would come out as 3
No.
words.
Work, yeah, that's 3 words, sorry.
Yeah.
Work, works, works. They would
Yeah.
have a different number. If we had time, I would show you. But you can welcome to have a look and try it, actually, because that will, yeah. If it doesn't, better tell me. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have thought it would be better to group the words together in terms of lemmas, so that work and works and working would go together, whereas work and like,
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah. Yeah, that's...
intuitive. I was also going to
Wow.
ask,
Yes.
are you looking at other things, other measures of complexity or difficulty, like when you mentioned them just now in terms of what the examining countries might be working on.
For example?
Things like word length or sentence length or
Well,
syllable average.
some of them are there. You've got words with more than 2 syllables, average syllables per sentence, average syllables per word, syllables per 100 words. You've got the readability scores, Flesch, Kincaid, Gunning, which are pretty old hat nowadays. That's why we put in the VOC-D and the MTLD under lexical diversity, which I think are generally reckoned to be more useful. But obviously they need longer texts. So but any suggestions gratefully received. If you can see something you think you would like, tell us and we'll try to put it in. I think that's part of the purpose of it. All exhausted?
We should really call time.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you allow users, for example, to provide feedback in order to I know that this discussion is very enriching. So what do you think of allowing users to provide feedback in order to improve the design?
Sure, absolutely. And on the help site, there will be a special space for comments and discussion. Yeah, there will be. I think we need to get that going quickly. Okay, we ought to stop now because wine is...